Hey, it's Sean from the Commander's Brew. This time we're doing a Ziatora brew where we're all about doing 40 damage at once. Yeah, and that Darksteel Eric's going to show up at some point, I'm sure. And I'm just required to step in contractually as a representative of Darksteel Industries, new sponsor of the show. I'm Darksteel Eric, the representative of said company, and I'm just checking in to say hi. Hi, back to Sean. Okay, this is Ziatora the Incinerator, and the theme of this deck is Ziatora's 40s. That's right, I'm trying to do 40 damage at once with their fling ability. I'm not interested in doing like 10 points of damage to an opponent here or there. I'll kill a creature if I have to, if it means we'll lose the game otherwise, but what I want to do is get a creature massive and fling it in one shot with Ziatora. Ziatora the Incinerator is a very cool dragon. It's always weird that these dragons are 6/6 when it's like a 7/7 kind of deal. That's what the Elder Dragon format is all about. But these are demon dragons, not elder dragons, fine. At your end step, you get a fling and 3 treasures. So I want to do that. I want to kill entire opponents in a single fling. You know, I want the creatures in the deck to know that they really meant something. I'm not throwing them away for a little bit. And this is obviously the kind of deck that your opponents can see coming. They know Ziatora's in your command zone, and they know that you've got creatures that are becoming 40 power, so they're not stupid. They're going to know what's up. So we have to protect them with cards like Snakeskin Veil, any of those little single mana instants that give you hexproof, just to keep Ziatora alive. So let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about those creatures that we intend to get swole. Skid Bob's nice in that it only costs 1, but it does take a really long time for this to get up to 40 power if we're only adding 4 counters at a time. Primordial Hydra is more our speed. You have to kind of start it going at a pretty decent size, but this will get to 40 in no time. Mossbridge Troll is especially interesting because it's got default regeneration, which is interesting. And it doesn't actually get +1/+1 counters, but it can get +20/+20 at a time. We just got to do that twice, and this thing is 40 power. And then there's Hydra's Growth, which is just the enchantment that kind of does the same thing as Primordial Hydra. Doubling doesn't take long. Growing a creature to 40 power probably requires +1/+1 counters. And if that's the case, we're going to want a little bit of synergy there. Corpsejack Menace is like a poor person's doubling season. We're mostly only dealing with +1/+1 counters anyway, so that'll be fine. Although it would be nice to get double those treasures every time too. And then Forgotten Ancient has cool synergy with the Menace because anytime anyone casts a spell, we're actually putting 2 counters on this, and when we move it, Corpsejack Menace will see the counters being added, so we will add double the counters as we move it. And of course, if you've got $30 lying around, the Ozolith is definitely something this deck would want if we're going with that counter strategy. You fling a creature with 1,000,000 counters on it, those counters go on the Ozolith, and then you put them right back on someone else that you're planning on flinging again. And similarly but different, Death's Presence is a decent enchantment. Most notably, we convert their power into +1/+1 counters. It doesn't just move the counters. If Mossbridge Troll is up to 45, that's 45 counters on something else. And then, of course, Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, is the budget Ozolith version that just does +1/+1 counters. But I'll take it though. It's what this deck wants to do. And of course, you're thinking, well, that's too much. And I know getting a creature to 40 power isn't easy. So what if we only got them to 20 power, but then we doubled the damage? Furnace of Wrath, Dictate of the Twin Gods. These are some classic enchantments that just double all the damage that anyone would do. Gratuitous Violence is similar but different. It only applies to creatures you control, which is nice because that means our opponents can't double things back at us. And really, we only care about Ziatora doing the damage, so this is fine. And then in sorcery form, we have Insult. And don't think I didn't notice that this thing costs 3 mana. That's how many treasures we get from Ziatora. So after 1 fling, we will have the 3 necessary to cast Insult. And if you get a couple of those going, you don't need a 40 power creature or even a 20 power creature. You can do a 10 power creature with 2 of these. 5 power with 3. With any more than that, it just becomes ridiculous. I don't even think there are creatures that small in here. But we don't have to go the enchantment route. We can combine different ways of doing this. We can also double the creature's power directly. Xenagos, God of Revels. Best in the biz for this. You simply double the power and toughness on your combat step. Mr. Orfeo the Boulder, as everyone compared this to the poor person's Xenagos, but I mean, I'm still doubling people's power until end of turn. But this one's on attack though. That is relevant. You have to survive combat. It shouldn't be too hard to survive if you're a 40-20 getting into combat. I guess Death Touch is a thing. And to keep the enchantments going, Unnatural Growth is another one that's just going to double our power and toughness of each creature every combat step. It's good on defense too if we need it. Now those cards I mentioned are just ways to get things doubling, but they're already on the battlefield. We don't need to pay additional to have them work their magic once we drop Ziatora. But if we've got a ton of treasures, we might have a little bit of mana to spend on this sort of thing, and I got you covered. Exponential Growth, this is what I'm talking about. You can double something's power as many times as you need to make it a 40 for the kill. Unleash Fury, a simple 2-mana instant that does the exact job we want. Nath of the Dire Hunt also does it in combat, and we get to double the creature's power until end of turn, not the toughness. And we're starting to get enough ways of doubling power or doubling damage that we actually should be able to get a couple of them down without much difficulty. But I want more. I can never get enough. A card like Dreadhorde Butcher, we can use other effects like Hydra's Growth, other things to double its power, add more +1/+1 counters, Corpse Check, Menace, for example. And if we can get this card to 40 power, when we fling it, it'll die and also do 40 damage to any other target. This is the one stone that kills 2 opponents. Fireblade Charger, basically the same thing. And then Stalking Vengeance is a turbocharged way of happening. This turns every single one of our creatures into a Dreadhorde Butcher kind of effect. Notably though, the Stalking Vengeance can't hit other creatures. Weird. And so then I want to look at other ways to make creatures huge. Colossification is the aura that I'm aware of that adds the most power and toughness. 2020. Just one doubler at that point. Colossus Hammer is a hefty cost indeed and only gives +10/+10. They also lose flying. It's worth at least looking at. I want to take a second and talk about legendary creatures. I've been finding that more and more decks that I brew have more and more legendary creatures in them. Being legendary is a drawback in a format where you're allowed multiple copies. You can push the power of them a little bit, but still kind of keep it restricted by the fact that you can only have one on the battlefield at the same time. In our case, we only ever have one, so legendary creatures are just pushed cards for their normal mana cost. All that is to say that I think Blackblade Reforged belongs in more decks. If we have to pay the expensive cost, it's the same as Colossus Hammer, presuming we have something like 10 lands out. But the fact that it equips a legendary creature for only 3, and we've got quite a few in here. We got green in our color identity. We will have a lot of lands. Don't worry about it. Now, I mentioned a couple of artifacts. There is a way we could go with this deck where we keep adding more and more artifacts. Little mana dorks in artifact form, artifact ramp, tons of mana rocks, that sort of thing. I mean, we're already making treasures with Ziatora, so then something like Nettle Cyst becomes really good. For that 2 equip, I'm looking at least +10/+10. It puts Colossus Hammer to shame. And at that point, I also want to run Cranial Plating. Equipping at instant speed is no joke. And if you want a big power creature to fling around, how about Darksteel Juggernaut? This thing's also indestructible. Ooh, Darksteel, that's my cue. Darksteel Eric here, representative of Darksteel Industries, as a sponsor of the show, reminding you to like and subscribe this video. It helps us out as a major corporation. And also, I've got 2 ads for you. One fake, one real. Here we go. Cooking for yourself is hard. That's where YOLO Fresh comes in. We're going to send you 15 free meal boxes. They are definitely coming to your doorstep, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. And inside each kit is all the freshest ingredients, an easy-to-read instruction card, and 1 packet of Phyrexian parasitic goop that will certainly assimilate you. YOLO Fresh, part of a complete breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this one's the real one, from the Wizards Tower, wizardtower.com. Seriously, if you're in Canada, it is the best deal for Magic singles. 5% off your singles order if you spend at least 20 using coupon code BREWBALDERS. wizardtower.com. Also a great place to get more Magic articles and other content. Back to the show. Okay, we've been having a lot of fun talking about doubling damage and flinging things for full kills, but what are we using to fling? I need some real meatheads in the deck. Huge creatures with as low as cost as possible. I did a search for 10 powered creatures and Colossus of Akros came up. 10 power is a convenient starting point because it's exactly 2 doubles. 8 mana isn't cheap. Being able to monstrosity 10 makes this a 20/20. I think it's at least worth considering. But here's where deck brewing gets interesting. Colossus of Akros, Colossification, Colossus Hammer. That word Colossus probably means really big things. So I just put that word into Scryfall. I couldn't put Colossus because there's Colossal or Colossification, different variants of it. So I just put Coloss. And before you go searching yourself, there is no equipment called Colostomy Bag. At least not till a secret layer or something. Maybe an alternate for Bag of Holding. Anyway, I found Chameleon Colossus, which actually works quite nicely in the deck. It is a little bit to pay, but being able to double its power for 4 mana, that's what I'm talking about. And Metalwork Colossus, if we really do want to do that artifact version with a bunch of mana rocks, this thing can come down for 0 mana and it's already a 10/10. The best part is we only have to sacrifice 2 artifacts to bring it back to your hand, and I'm probably going to sacrifice 2 of the treasures Ziatora made. It's hard to keep this thing down. And again, 10 power, just 2 doubles. This card kind of fits perfectly for that version. And some other meatheads include Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, 5 mana Star. The stars are the lands plus all the creatures you control because those creatures will now be forests, which also count as lands. Lord of Extinction most likely is well over a 10/10 by the time you can cast it, especially if there's a mill deck out there or some kind of self-mill thing going on. This card could have 40 power without us even doing anything. Ghoul Tree's worth talking about. Again, it's that 10 power creature, but we can discount this one. We might be able to cast this for a single green. Same with Primeval Protector. Unless nobody's running creature decks, we can probably also cast this 10/10 for a single green. Meatheads. Meaty meatheads. Sure, this deck is a bit of a glass cannon, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, no big deal. If I can't get Ziatora down, I'll just attack with these 40/40s and just do damage the old-fashioned way, right? No, it's not the spirit of this deck. This deck isn't about doing that damage. It would be far too tempting. Once we get 20-powered, 40-powered creatures, it's called Ziatora's 40s. It's not called Big Combat Deck. So that's why I want to consider cards like this. Meekstone makes it so big creatures don't untap. It protects us while we do our setup so that other big creatures can't be attacking into us, and we won't be tempted to attack because we won't want to turn our stuff sideways. Silent Arbiter in a similar fashion really limits combat. I mean, it actually might have the wrong effect on us because we kind of only want to attack with one thing if we got one thing that's 40/40 or above. So maybe this isn't the right idea for what we want to accomplish. There's a really sneaky kill out there, right? Ziatora is the card that's doing the damage. So if we cast a little Tainted Strike on them, we only have to do 10 damage. And I think it is important to have a bit of a backup plan, which is why I'm running Chandra's Ignition. You got to be careful with this because your opponents can remove the creature before this thing resolves, and then this does nothing. And that's why I've got all those Snakeskin Veils and Hexproof instants in the deck. And your opponents have to think twice. If you cast a Snakeskin Veil out of nowhere on a 40-powered creature, they're going to know something is up. So if they're holding a removal spell, they will have to fire it off in response. And if they don't, now it's hexproof. Now we can cast the Chandra's Ignition. And I know I said it was all about Ziatora's 40s, but the spirit of the deck is Ziatora doing flings that do one-hit kills. And that's why Torgar's in the deck, because if I can make a player's life total become 20, that's sort of like doubling power. So I'm going to say this is allowed. This is legal. Even if I do a 20 fling to them, I think that's fine. This sounds like a fun deck. It's a little bit of a twist on Ziatora, which is what we're all about here. I don't like doing kind of the most obvious brews for things. And I acknowledge that this is a little bit simple. This is predictable, and your opponents might see this coming. I think this is probably better suited at a mid to low power table, but I also think this is great for newer players. If you've got someone who's getting into the game, I might suggest this kind of deck for them. It's big, it's flashy, they certainly can attack with the creatures if they want to. And the best part is, I think for a new player, that the game plan is very clear. They can really play towards their game plan. Sometimes commander decks get real convoluted and hard to grasp for newer players. Well, there you have it. Please tune in next time. We're going to have another deck for you. As always, the decks don't stop. And in the meantime, keep being you. The world's a better place for it. See you next time.